Most women don't realize the quiet power they hold when they choose to live by their own standards. Not rules meant to control someone else, but values that guide how they love, how they give, and how they allow themselves to be treated. Because here's the truth: respect isn't built in the loud moments, it's built in the small ones, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you expect honesty without begging for it, in the way you keep your peace instead of chasing someone who's pulling away. Men notice that. The right men are drawn to it, and the wrong men are exposed by it. When you live this way, you don't have to demand respect. It comes to you. And the ones who can't give it quietly step aside. Some of the hardest moments in relationships aren't the arguments or the breakups. It's the quiet confusion in between. That space where you're not sure if you're being valued or just tolerated. Where you feel the shift in someone's tone, the delay in their replies, the absence of the little things they used to do, but you tell yourself not to overthink it. You carry that weight in silence, hoping it's just a phase, but deep down you know respect is either growing or it's fading. And that's where these 6 rules matter. Not as tricks, not as games, but as steady lines that keep you from losing yourself while loving someone else. They're the difference between holding your dignity and handing it away, between being chosen and being settled for. And once you start living by them, you stop wondering if you're respected. You know, respect isn't something you ask for over and over again until the other person finally gives it. It's something you create by the way you live, the way you carry yourself, and the way you draw the line between what's okay and what's not. Boundaries aren't about building walls to keep people out. They're about creating a safe space where love can breathe without fear of being taken advantage of. They're the quiet, steady reminders that say, I value myself enough to not accept less than what's healthy. And here's the thing, when you keep those boundaries consistent, respect naturally grows. Not just from others, but from yourself. You stop second guessing whether you deserve better because you're living like someone who knows they do. The real struggle for a lot of people is that they think setting boundaries will push someone away. So they bend them. They make exceptions. They hope that if they're more flexible, more understanding, more accommodating, the other person will see their worth. But what usually happens is the opposite. The more you bend, the more they lean. The more you excuse, the more they push. And slowly, without even noticing, you've taught them that your no is negotiable, that your comfort is optional, that their wants outweigh your needs. It doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because you care, because you want the relationship to work. But caring without boundaries doesn't build closeness. It builds imbalance. Healthy people, the kind of people who truly respect you, aren't afraid of your boundaries. They might not always like them in the moment, but they understand they come from a place of self-respect, not control. They know that when you say no, you mean it. When you set a limit, you keep it. And that consistency makes them feel safe with you. It shows them that your love isn't random or reactive. It's intentional. That's the kind of love people trust because it's built on something steady. Keeping boundaries isn't always comfortable. It means sitting in the silence when someone is upset that you didn't give in. It means hearing the frustration when you stand your ground. It means risking that someone will leave because they don't want to meet you at the level of respect you require. And yes, sometimes they will leave, but here's the truth you need to hold on to. The people who walk away because you have boundaries were never going to give you the respect you needed anyway. They weren't leaving because you were too much. They were leaving because they couldn't take advantage of you anymore. Respect grows in the boundaries you keep, because those boundaries quietly communicate your worth without you having to explain it. You don't have to convince anyone to treat you better. You just have to consistently treat yourself better. And the people who are meant to stay in your life, the ones who love you in a healthy, steady way, will meet you there. Every time. One of the easiest mistakes to make in a relationship is confusing love with self-sacrifice. You start out wanting to give, to show up, to be all in, and before you know it, your own needs are an afterthought. You stop doing the little things that used to make you feel like yourself. You avoid speaking up about what bothers you because you don't want to cause problems. You adjust your life, your plans, even your personality to keep the peace. And somewhere along the way, you realize you've been loving them so much, you forgot to love yourself too. That's not what healthy love looks like. Love is meant to be shared, not traded for pieces of yourself. Losing yourself in a relationship doesn't happen overnight. It happens in tiny compromises that seem harmless in the moment. Skipping time with friends because they might not like it. Letting go of hobbies because they're not a big deal. Changing how you speak, what you wear, what you dream about, all so you can fit better into their comfort zone. At first, it feels like you're just being flexible. But slowly, your life starts revolving entirely around them. And while it might look like closeness, it's actually imbalance. Because when you disappear in the relationship loses the very person they were drawn to in the first place, you. Loving without losing yourself means holding on to the things that make you feel alive, even when you're deeply connected to someone. It means remembering that you're allowed to have your own opinions, your own routines, and your own life outside of the relationship. It's not selfish to protect your identity. It's necessary. When you keep showing up as your full self, you bring more to the table. You're more interesting. You're more grounded. And you're less likely to resent them later for taking something that, in reality, you gave away. There's a quiet strength in being able to say, I love you, but I can't give up this part of me. Not because you're trying to create distance, but because you know that distance isn't the same as disconnection. In fact, it's the opposite. Healthy space keeps love breathing. It keeps two people from suffocating under the weight of constant togetherness. When you both have room to grow individually, you create a stronger, healthier os. And yes, this can be uncomfortable. Some partners might see your independence as a threat, especially if they're used to relationships where the other person revolves around them. But the right partner, the one who truly respects you, will encourage it. They'll want you to keep shining in your own right because they know that's part of what makes the love between you so strong. Love without losing yourself isn't about building walls or holding back affection. It's about showing up with your whole self intact every day so you can give and receive love in a way that's sustainable. Because the kind of love worth keeping doesn't require you to disappear. It allows you to be fully seen. Saying no is one of the simplest things to do, and one of the hardest to actually say out loud, especially with the people we care about most. In relationships, no can feel dangerous. You worry it will create tension, make them upset, or push them away. So you say yes, even when it's not what you want. You go along with plans you don't have the energy for. You agree to things that go against your values. You let boundaries slide because it feels easier than explaining yourself. And for a while, it keeps the peace on the surface. But underneath, something starts to shift. Resentment grows quietly. Your energy drains. And the connection you were trying to protect actually becomes weaker, not stronger. The quiet power of saying no isn't about rejection. It's about truth. It's about having the courage to be honest in moments when it would be easier to keep someone happy. No communicates where your limits are. It tells the other person, I care about you, but I also care about me. That's not selfish, that's self-respect. And in healthy relationships, self-respect is non-negotiable. Because the moment you start betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable, you're building a connection on uneven ground. Eventually, it will crack. Part of the struggle is that many of us were raised to believe love means always giving, always accommodating, always putting others first. And while generosity is a beautiful thing, it's not the same as self-abandonment. When you never say no, you're not showing love. You're hiding parts of yourself to be accepted. Over time, the other person learns to expect your yes. They stop asking with the same care they once did. They assume you'll always bend, so they stop checking to see if you're okay. That's how relationships slip into patterns where one person carries more than the other without either of them fully realizing it. Saying no is also an act of trust. You trust that the other person can handle your honesty. You trust that your connection is strong enough to hold a difference in opinion or desire. And if they can't handle it, that's not a sign you should stop saying no. It's a sign the relationship might need to grow or that you may be giving more than it can hold. Either way, your voice matters. Your needs matter. And honoring them doesn't make you difficult, it makes you clear. The quiet power of saying no shows up in small, everyday moments. Choosing rest over one more obligation. Declining to engage in an argument that goes nowhere. Turning down something that doesn't align with your values. Each time you do, you're telling yourself, I'm allowed to take up space here. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. People start to trust your yes because they know it's real. It's not coming from pressure or guilt, but from a place of choice. And in that space, respect has room to grow. Trust doesn't happen because of one big, grand gesture. It's built in the little things you do over and over again. The way you follow through on what you say. The way your tone stays steady even in conflict. The way you show up on the days you don't feel like it. Consistency is what teaches someone they can lean on you without worrying if the ground will give way. In relationships, it's not about being perfect. It's about being dependable. Because no matter how much love there is, if your actions are unpredictable, the other person will always keep one foot out the door, just in case. The hard truth is inconsistency wears people down. One week you're present and attentive, the next you're distracted and distant. You open up one moment, then shut down the next. You make promises in the heat of an emotional high, but when it's time to deliver, you're too tired, too busy, or you just forget. And when that pattern repeats, it doesn't matter how many times you say, "I love you," your words start to lose weight, because trust is built in patterns, not in isolated moments. Consistency doesn't mean you never have off days. It means that even on your off days, you're still clear, still honest, still showing up in a way that's true to your word. It's calling when you said you would. It's following through on the boundaries you've set even when it's uncomfortable. It's keeping your emotional tone steady enough that the other person doesn't feel like they have to walk on eggshells, waiting to see which version of you they're going to get today. And when you do that, you're not just making them feel secure, you're also building your own integrity. You start to trust yourself more because you know you can count on you. One of the most damaging things in a relationship is when someone never knows what to expect from you. It forces them into a constant state of guessing. Are they in a good mood? Do they mean what they said? Will they still feel this way tomorrow? That guessing game is exhausting. It's not sustainable. Eventually, people stop investing the same energy because they can't keep bracing for the drop. Consistency takes that guesswork out. It allows them to relax, to be more open, to give more because they know where you stand. It's not about grand gestures, expensive gifts, or perfect words. It's about the daily proof that you are who you say you are. The text you send because you promise to check in. The way you follow through on the small things, not just the big ones. The way you keep your commitments to them, even when no one's watching. That's the stuff that builds a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. When you're consistent, trust doesn't have to be asked for. It just happens. And when trust is there, love doesn't have to fight to survive. It has the space to grow because it's planted in ground that's steady. The way you see yourself quietly decides how other people will treat you. You don't have to say it out loud. It shows in the way you carry yourself, the boundaries you set, and the things you're willing to accept. Self-worth sets the tone long before you ever open your mouth. When you know you have value, you don't chase approval, you don't fight for scraps of attention, and you don't cling to someone just because you're afraid to lose them. You love freely, but you also know you're going to be okay if that love isn't returned the way you need. That kind of confidence doesn't make you hard to love. It makes you easier to respect. When self-worth is missing, it's easy to fall into patterns where you're constantly proving yourself. You over-explain your worth to someone who's not listening. You try harder every time they pull away. You settle for almost enough because you tell yourself it's better than nothing. And over time, you stop noticing the small ways you're being overlooked or disrespected. You convince yourself it's normal to feel anxious about where you stand. But deep down, something inside you knows this isn't love that's lifting you up. It's love that's wearing you down. The hard truth is, people take their cues from you. If you treat your needs like they're optional, others will too. If you consistently put yourself last, they'll stop thinking about putting you first. And it's not always because they're bad people. It's because you've taught them through your actions that it's acceptable. But when you start showing up with self-worth, the dynamic changes. You stop trying to fit into spaces where you don't belong. You stop excusing behavior that chips away at your peace. You start choosing relationships where your presence is appreciated, not just convenient. Self-worth doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean you believe you're better than anyone else. It means you understand your value without having to compare it to someone else's. It's a quiet knowing that says, I deserve to be treated with care and respect, and I won't settle for less. And when that knowing is in place, you don't have to demand respect. It comes naturally. The people who can give it will step closer, and the ones who can't will drift away. Living from self-worth also means you can receive love without fear. You're not constantly looking for proof or reassurance because you're not measuring your worth by someone else's attention. You can enjoy affection without becoming dependent on it. And when conflict comes, because it always will, you can address it calmly instead of panicking that it's the beginning of the end. When self-worth sets the tone, you create relationships where love feels steady instead of fragile, where respect is the starting point, not the reward you get for being good enough. And the more you live in that space, the more you realize the way someone treats you isn't just about who they are. It's about what you've shown them you will accept. Honesty is the oxygen of a relationship. Without it, things might look fine on the outside for a while, but underneath, the connection slowly starts to suffocate. Being honest doesn't just mean telling the truth when asked. It means living in a way where your words, your actions, and your intentions match. It means saying what you feel instead of burying it to avoid discomfort. It means speaking up when something bothers you, not letting it pile up until it spills out in anger or silence. When you practice that kind of honesty, you create a space where both people can relax because there's no constant guessing about where you stand. The trouble is, a lot of us avoid honesty because we think it will protect the relationship. We don't want to hurt the other person, so we soften the truth or keep it to ourselves. We tell ourselves it's not worth bringing up, that it will only cause tension. But every time you swallow your feelings instead of sharing them, you put one more brick in the wall between you. Over time, those bricks add up. And one day you wake up realizing you're living in the same house, but you can't reach each other anymore. Honesty doesn't have to be harsh. It's not about dumping every passing thought or using the truth as a weapon. It's about being clear in a way that still protects the other person's dignity. Saying, "I felt hurt when you canceled our plans last minute," is different from saying, "You never care about me." One invites connection, the other pushes it away. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to protect the bond by addressing the small fractures before they turn into breaks. When honesty is consistent, trust grows. Your partner starts to believe that when you say something, it's real, that if something's wrong, they'll hear it from you first, not in an argument months later or through subtle resentment. And when they feel safe in that, they're more likely to be honest in return. That's when real connection happens, when both people can bring their full selves to the table without fear of being blindsided. Avoiding the truth might keep things calm in the short term, but it builds instability over time. It forces the other person to guess at your feelings, to read between the lines, to interpret silences that could have been avoided with a few honest words. And when people are left guessing for too long, they start to pull back. Not because they don't care, but because uncertainty is exhausting. Honesty protects connection because it keeps the air clear. It allows love to move freely without getting tangled in unspoken tension. It says, "I respect you enough to tell you the truth, and I trust you enough to handle it." That's the kind of foundation that can hold the weight of real life, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And in the end, real is what lasts. Honesty is what keeps a relationship breathing. Without it, you can still have moments that look good from the outside, smiles and pictures, polite conversations, shared routines, but inside the connection starts to thin out. Real closeness isn't just built on affection, it's built on the confidence that you know where you stand with each other. That comes from truth. Truth about what you need, what you feel, and even what's not working. When you can speak those things out loud, you create a space where love doesn't have to tiptoe around reality. The hard part is most people don't avoid honesty because they want to lie. They avoid it because they're afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of hurting the other person, afraid of what the truth might change. So instead, they leave things unsaid. They hold back little frustrations, brush off moments that actually cut deep, pretend they're fine when they're not. And at first, it feels like you're protecting the peace. But unspoken truths don't disappear. They collect. They settle into the corners of your relationship like dust, until one day you realize the air between you feels heavier than it should. Honesty doesn't have to be brutal to be real. You can tell the truth with kindness. You can say, "It hurt me when you canceled our plans," instead of, "You don't care about me." You can say, "I need more time together," instead of, "You're never around." Honesty works best when it's anchored in respect, when it's about opening a door, not slamming it shut. Because the goal isn't to win a point, it's to keep the connection alive and clear. Inconsistent honesty, where you're open one day but closed off the next, creates instability. Your partner never quite knows which version of you they'll get. That uncertainty forces people into self-protection mode. They start holding back too, not because they want to hide, but because they don't know how safe it is to be vulnerable with you. Over time, that's how emotional distance sets in, not from lack of love, but from lack of clarity. When you choose honesty, you send the message, "You don't have to guess with me." That's powerful. It means your partner doesn't have to read between the lines or analyze every small shift in your mood. They can trust your words because your words match your truth. And when that trust is in place, the relationship has more room to breathe. Avoiding the truth might feel like you're keeping things calm, but it actually puts cracks in the foundation. Every unspoken frustration, every silent hurt is like a loose brick that makes the whole structure less steady. Addressing things early, even if they're uncomfortable, keeps those bricks in place. Honesty protects connection because it keeps you both on the same page. It tells the other person, I respect you enough to let you see the real me, even when it's messy. And when two people can do that for each other, the relationship doesn't just survive the hard moments, it becomes stronger because of them. Respect isn't something you talk someone into giving you. You can ask for kindness, you can point out what's fair, you can even explain what you need. But real respect is built over time through how you show up, not through how loudly you demand it. In relationships, this is where a lot of frustration comes from. You might feel you've been clear about your boundaries, yet the other person still crosses them. You might have told them how you want to be treated, but their actions don't match their words. And it's tempting in those moments to repeat yourself, to push harder, to convince them. But the truth is, respect doesn't come from requests alone. It comes from consistent actions that set the standard. When you carry yourself with self-respect, you naturally teach others where the lines are. You follow through on your boundaries instead of only talking about them. You show that you value your time by how you spend it, that you value your voice by using it, and that you value your peace by protecting it. People take their cues from that. If you tolerate being dismissed, they learn they can dismiss you. If you stand firm when something crosses the line, they learn you mean what you say. And over time, those patterns shape how they interact with you. The mistake many people make is thinking that asking for respect once is enough. But if your actions don't match your words, the message gets lost. If you tell someone you won't accept something but keep allowing it, the unspoken message is that your boundary is flexible. And it's not always about the other person trying to disrespect you. Sometimes it's simply that human behavior adapts to what's reinforced. If they see that there's no consequence for crossing the line stops existing in their mind. Earning respect also means respecting yourself in the moments when it's hardest, when you're tempted to lower your standards because you're afraid of losing someone, when you think staying quiet will keep the peace, when you accept less because you hope they'll eventually give more. Those are the moments that define the tone of your relationship, because the truth is people rarely treat you better than you treat yourself. The right people will respond to your self-respect with more respect of their own. They'll notice that you don't tolerate being spoken to in certain ways, that you walk away from situations that drain you, that you give your best but don't give yourself away. And they'll rise to meet that level, or they won't, and they'll fade out of your life. Either way, your standard remains intact. Respect isn't requested, it's earned. And the way you earn it is by living in a way that leaves no question about how you expect to be treated. Not through demands, not through arguments, but through the quiet consistency of someone who knows their worth and doesn't step out of it. That's when respect stops being a favor someone gives you and becomes the natural result of who you are. Games in relationships are often a cover for fear. The fear of being too vulnerable, too available, too invested. So instead of saying what we feel, we wait for the other person to make the first move. Instead of being clear about what we want, we drop hints and hope they pick them up. We withhold affection to see if they'll notice, delay replies to seem less eager, or act indifferent when we're anything but. On the surface, it can look like control, but underneath, it's insecurity. It's the quiet belief that if we show our cards too soon, we'll lose the upper hand. The truth is, those games don't create closeness, they create distance. When two people are busy protecting themselves from looking too invested, no one is really investing. You end up in a loop of second guessing. Should I text first? Did I say too much? Are they losing interest? And that loop slowly chips away at the trust you're trying to build. Real connection can't grow in a space where both people are more focused on winning than on understanding each other. Letting go of games takes strength because it means letting go of that safety net. It means showing up as you are, even if that means admitting you care more than they do right now. It means answering when you want to answer, not when you think it will make you look more desirable. It means speaking directly instead of hoping they'll read between the lines. And yes, it might mean finding out sooner rather than later if they're not as invested as you are. That can hurt, but it also saves you from wasting time in something that was never going to be real. When you stop playing games, you give the other person the gift of clarity. They don't have to wonder where they stand with you. And you don't have to wonder if they're drawn to your authentic self or to the performance you've been putting on. You're saying, this is me. This is how I show up. You can meet me here or not. But at least you'll know the truth. That kind of openness can feel risky, but it's the only way to build something that lasts. People who value real connection will respond to that honesty with more of their own. They'll relax because they don't have to keep up a front either. And the ones who are only in it for the game, they'll lose interest, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped feeding the very thing they were here for. That's a blessing in disguise. The strength in letting go of games is knowing you'd rather lose someone for being yourself than keep them by being someone you're not. It's understanding that love built on pretense is fragile, but love built on truth can weather storms. And when you live that way, you stop worrying about winning or losing. You focus on connecting, and that's where the real victory is. The hardest part about having standards in relationships isn't setting them. It's keeping them when your heart gets involved. When you're on your own, it's easy to say, I won't accept this, or I deserve better. But the moment you meet someone you care about, those lines can start to blur. You start making small exceptions, telling yourself they're just temporary. You convince yourself that if you're patient enough, understanding enough, or flexible enough, the other person will rise to meet the standard you know you need. And before you know it, you're giving more room to their comfort than to your own values. The truth is, standards are not rules for other people. They're guidelines for yourself. They're the lines that keep you from losing sight of who you are in the middle of loving someone else. And when they're not second nature yet, you'll feel the pull to adjust them every time emotions get in the way. That's why the real work isn't just in deciding your standards. It's in practicing them until they become part of you. Until they're not something you have to think about or fight for. They're simply how you live. In the early stages of dating or a relationship, standards can feel fragile. You might feel pressure to be easygoing or low maintenance, afraid that having firm expectations will scare someone off. So you let small things slide. You accept half effort because you don't want to seem demanding. You brush off comments that sting because you're afraid of being labeled too sensitive. And while each of those choices feels small in the moment, they quietly add up. They send the message, not just to the other person, but to yourself, that your standards are optional. When standards become second nature, the opposite happens. You no longer negotiate with yourself about whether it's okay to be treated a certain way. If something crosses the line, you address it, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You don't need to rehearse what to say or work yourself up to do it, because it's simply what you do. Just like you lock your door at night without thinking, you protect your emotional space automatically. That's not being cold or guarded. That's being consistent. One of the biggest challenges in holding to your standards is the fear of loss. It's the thought, if I say no to this, I might lose them. And that fear can be powerful enough to make you lower the bar just to keep someone in your life. But here's the thing. If keeping them means lowering your standards, you're not keeping a healthy relationship. You're keeping a version of it that runs on yourself. Compromise. And that version will always drain you more than it fills you. It's not about demanding perfection from the other person. It's about knowing what's non-negotiable for your well-being and refusing to give that up for temporary closeness. That might mean you expect communication to be honest and direct. It might mean you require mutual effort in making plans. It might mean you won't tolerate passive-aggressive comments or emotional manipulation. Whatever it is, it's not about creating a checklist for someone else to pass. It's about creating an environment where you can thrive. When standards are second nature, you stop explaining them over and over. You stop feeling the need to defend why you need what you need. You live in a way that makes them obvious. If you value your time, you won't wait endlessly for someone to decide when they can see you. You'll keep moving forward with your life. If you value respect, you won't stay in conversations where you're being belittled. You'll excuse yourself without guilt. If you value reciprocity, you'll notice when you're carrying the connection alone, and you'll step back until it's balanced. Some people will test your standards, not because they want to hurt you, but because they're used to relationships where those lines are fuzzy. They might not be aware of how they've been operating. And sometimes when you hold to your standards, it will cause friction. They might push back, accuse you of being too rigid, or try to convince you that this is just how I am. Those are the moments that define whether your standards are truly part of you or still negotiable. Because it's easy to hold the line when it's respected. It's harder when it's challenged by someone you care about. There's also another truth we don't talk about enough. When you consistently live by your standards, you won't connect with everyone. You'll lose some people, and that can feel lonely, especially if you've spent years in relationships where you've compromised to keep the peace. But that space you create by letting go of the wrong people is the exact space needed for the right ones to step in. People who don't just tolerate your standards, but value them. People who are drawn to you because you live with self-respect, not in spite of it. The beauty of having your standards woven into your everyday life is that it makes relationships less about constant negotiation and more about mutual alignment. You're no longer trying to mold yourself into what someone else needs, and you're no longer trying to mold them into what you need. You simply live as you are, and they either meet you there or they don't. That doesn't make you cold or inflexible. It makes you clear. And clarity is one of the most attractive and stabilizing qualities you can bring into any relationship. The more you practice, the less effort it takes. At first, you might feel your stomach tighten every time you have to speak up for yourself. You might replay the conversation in your head afterward, wondering if you were too much. But over time, it becomes natural. You start to feel more peace than anxiety in holding the line. You start to realize that keeping your standards isn't just about protecting yourself from harm. It's about making space for the kind of love and respect you actually want. And here's the quiet shift that happens. When your standards become second nature, the people around you start to adjust without you having to ask. They understand what you will and won't accept, and they either step up or step out. The ones who stay do so because they want to, not because you've convinced or coerced them. And that's how you know the respect you're getting is real. It's freely given, not negotiated. Living this way doesn't mean you stop being flexible in the small things. Relationships still require compromise, patience, and grace. But those adjustments happen inside the boundaries you've already set. You can bend without breaking. You can give without losing. You can love without forgetting yourself. And when that becomes your default, you no longer wonder if you're asking for too much. You know that you're simply asking for what's right for you. And you know you'll wait for someone who can meet you there. When standards become second nature, you stop bracing for disrespect because you've built a life that doesn't make room for it. You move through relationships with more ease, more certainty, and more peace. You stop needing constant reassurance because you trust yourself to protect what matters. And that trust in yourself changes everything. Because in the end, the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one that sets the tone for all the rest, is the one you have with you. Holding space without chasing is one of the hardest things to do when you care deeply about someone. Every instinct in you wants to close the gap, fix the misunderstanding, or reassure yourself that you're still okay with each other. It's the part of relationships no one tells you about. The moments when silence feels heavier than words, when distance feels like rejection, and when the urge to prove your worth or earn someone's attention can quietly pull you out of yourself. But here's the truth. Healthy love isn't something you have to chase. It's something that meets you halfway. And if you're always the one doing the running, you're teaching the other person they don't need to move. Holding space means you're present without being intrusive. It's showing that you care, but not at the cost of your own dignity. It's not stonewalling or withdrawing out of spite. It's saying, I'm here, I'm steady, and I'm not going to beg for connection that should be freely given. This kind of posture isn't about punishment. It's about respect for yourself and for the other person's right to come toward you on their own terms. Because when we chase, we create a dynamic where the other person learns they can pull away without consequence, and we'll just follow. That dynamic doesn't lead to mutual trust or balanced intimacy. It leads to exhaustion for one person and complacency for the other. The pull to chase often comes from fear of abandonment, fear of misunderstanding, fear of losing something you've worked hard to build. But fear-driven actions almost always backfire in relationships. They make you act out of urgency instead of clarity, and urgency can blur your ability to see if someone actually wants to meet you halfway. You end up investing more energy than the relationship is returning, and over time, that imbalance chips away at your self-worth. When you choose to hold space, you're resisting that fear. You're saying, I trust myself enough to not collapse if you step back. I trust the truth to reveal itself, whether it confirms that you want to be here or that you don't. That kind of self-assuredness is magnetic. It communicates confidence without arrogance, availability without desperation. People sense it, and those who value you will respond to it by showing up, not because they were pushed, but because they genuinely want to. It's important to understand that holding space without chasing doesn't mean doing nothing. It means tending to your own side of the relationship, being clear in your communication, consistent in your boundaries, and present in your care, but leaving room for the other person to contribute their part. It's a conscious decision to let actions speak louder than pressure. If they reach out, you meet them. If they don't, you still hold your ground, Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that not everyone will meet you in the middle, no matter how much you wish they would. And that's where the real strength in holding space shows up, because you learn to let someone's absence speak for itself without trying to rewrite it. You stop trying to pull them closer and start paying attention to how they show up on their own. And that shift is where self-respect grows. When you live this way, something changes inside you. You start to feel more peace, even in uncertainty. You stop measuring your value by how quickly someone replies, how often they initiate, or how many reassurances they give. You measure it by how grounded you remain in your own worth, even when the other person's behavior wavers. That's not coldness. It's clarity. And clarity is what keeps your relationships honest. You can care deeply without chasing desperately. You can love fully without losing your center. And when you do, you'll see who shows up not because you pulled them in, but because they wanted to stand beside you all along. That's the kind of connection that lasts. It's not fueled by pressure or pursuit, but by mutual desire and respect. And it starts the moment you stop running and simply hold your place.